Oh, well, there's some there's some great research on Montessori and also Montessori-like things. For sure, the place that everyone needs to start is Angeline Lillard's article published in Science in the fall of 2006. A dynamite study, fantastic design. In effect, was able to do something that's hard to do. She got something called a random assignment to conditions because the Montessori schools in Milwaukee, where her study was done, because they're popular, not everybody can get into them, so you have to enter a lottery. And she was able to essentially compare the lottery winners, those who went to the Montessori school in Milwaukee, with lottery losers, the people who ended up going to lots of other schools, some of them very good schools, without question. She was able to compare how the kids who went to the Montessori school did to kids who went to, these other schools, and, just saw these, the sort of things that Montessorians would hope to see. She saw all of it. She saw academic benefits. She saw, particularly in things like creativity, self-expression, their sophistication of language use and writing. But there are also some things that, if we take a minute and think about how, what we want for our kids from an academic or from a school experience, things like socialization. I mean, there were clear differences in basically how kind they were to one another and how collaborative they were in their style of play. One of the things that she talks about that I kind of resonate with is she talked about the difference in the amount of a kind of playground activity that was called ambiguous rough play. We can all think of ambiguous rough play, what that looks like, and that's when you have two young children who are playing, and it's rough, and you really can't tell if they're enjoying it or not. Something's going on here, and they're getting a little bit amped up, and it's maybe going a little bit over the top, it's not a positive engagement. It really is kids getting a little bit out of hand with each other. There's dramatically less of that ambiguous rough play, and significantly more of what she called positive shared activities. So kids engage with each other in a meaningful way on the playground in unstructured time, basically having positive interactions with each other. And then there was something else in her study that I think is really important, and that I'll be replicating in some work that I'm going to be doing in the future, and that is this domain of executive functions. So executive functions are the kind of thinking that we do to organize ourselves and to evaluate our performance and to adjust the strategies that we might be implementing. These are the kind of sort of feedback loops and planning thoughts that we have to engage in for effective goal-directed behavior. It's how we keep ourselves squared away. And in fact, these class of mental operations that we call executive functions are kind of like the things that we use to be the CEO of ourselves, okay? And so even with young children, you can measure some aspects of this stuff. Obviously, as children get older, you can really directly measure some of these things. But what she was able to do with a young kid version of some of the tools that we would use as neuropsychologists, for example, to measure executive functions, she showed a dramatic benefit for the Montessori-educated children that persisted in some of these sort of self-organizing, weighing possibilities, kinds of mental operations. Executive functions are a big deal, and I think that we're going to be seeing more and more attention paid to these in research on education. People are sort of catching on to the relevance of these kinds of mental operations. So, the place to start is with Angeline Lillard's work. There's other work as well that's not doesn't have as good an experimental design, but really when people ask, does this work, and how can you get past selection effects, because it must be only people who love their children who send their kids to Montessori schools, right? That's what people will say. Well, they should look at the Craig Montessori example. We are on a course right now that it seems very clear that traditional education, as it's been defined, is really running out of steam. It doesn't have what people need to be successful in the future. It doesn't have what our planet needs to be successful in the future. And more people are becoming aware of that. So I'm a pediatric neuropsychologist. We're the people who do the assessment of brain functioning in children who maybe have a medical or developmental or some other issue that's resulted in a developmental problem or learning disability. Something's not working right. It's our job to do the cognitive assessment that allows everyone involved in the care and education of a child to sort of understand what the deal is and maybe chart the way forward for that kid. It's dawning on people that education should be about the development of the person and really not about knowing things, specific discrete facts. We're going to see other approaches to education become more popular and be seen as more relevant. What I would hope would be that over the next 25 years, people see that Montessori is just not one of a number of possible alternative educational approaches. It really is a fantastic educational approach. Maria Montessori really got essentially everything right, so far as I can see. She anticipated so much of what we know about neuroscience, brain development, optimal models of education. I think it's becoming clearer anyway, that what Montessori is offering is a kind of wide-scope development of the human person and their consciousness, their brain. And what traditional education was designed for may not be relevant so much in this era. People aren't going to enter the workforce and have a career and work at one place for the rest of their lives. People are going to have many careers, many jobs. That just seems to be the nature of how the world is changing. And what children need is the kind of broad scope ability to deal with new situations, size things up, and figure out a sensible way forward in any setting that they find themselves in.